King was one of those briefed last night by the administration. He has strong opinions on the matter, joining us from Washington. Congressman, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on New Day.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
So give me the skinny, Congressman. What happened at the meeting? What did you learn, and what did you think of it?
Well, within the limits that I can discuss, Chris, and I think we should have fairly broad limits because we asked them, announce to us those things that are classified, and that way we'll make sure that none of that goes out into the press. And there really wasn't an announcement like that, although there was a question specifically in that fashion. So here's what we had. We had a panel of people whose titles almost always started with either vice or deputy. These weren't cabinet members. They weren't top-line officials. These were second-tier people, maybe third-tier people, and they came to give us the party line. If you had read through, and you have, through the media reports and some that you've given, you would find that most of that was sent back to us after the White House has had a week or so to polish up their talking points. That was most of the substance of it. What we did learn, and I happened to see it reported this morning, is that there were a good number of people in the executive branch that knew about this, but not one person in the United States Congress knew about this, even though the law says thou shalt inform Congress 30 days before any release of prisoners out of Gitmo.
Thou shalt. Sounds like it was more than law, like it was a commandment. Let me ask you this. Do you think that any of this, to the extent, let's accept everything you say is true, do you think any of this is the poor working relationship coming back to haunt both the administration and lawmakers on your side of the aisle, that you guys don't get along well, and as a result, dysfunction everywhere?
Well, you would think the president would consult with Democrats when the law says you shall. Then you think he's had Harry Reid over there in the Senate. That's something else we learned. Weren't able to confirm that Harry Reid knew about this in advance, even though it seems as though he said so into the press. So if the president's not consulting with Democrats or Republicans, the thing that's very, very disturbing is why would the president not think that the United States Congress is useful in coming to a decision and consulting with the Congress? And instead, he had his scores of people inside the White House. This time, nothing leaked, which might not be the first time, but they've had leaks out of there, and they admit that. So I think he should have come to Congress, and this creates a more friction between Congress and the White House. And really, the friction is created on the White House side, Chris. How many times has the president decided to ignore the law, violate the law? And then, by the way, this is an excuse, too. It was, well, the timing didn't work out for us to consult with Congress. How long does it take to pick up the phone and call the Speaker of the House, the minority leader in the House, for the relevant chairs like Buck McKeon, for example, and Mike Rogers?
I take your point. I take your point on the timing issue. There's definitely points of criticism there, and it's definitely going on down there, and that's why we're following it. You also speak about the friction. You've created some friction yourself, though, Congressman, right? You tweeted out that it looks like both sides, swappies and negotiators, are working for al-Qaeda. Now, I assume that that's an exaggeration, but it certainly is going to create friction, right? You don't think they're really working for al-Qaeda on the U.S. government side, right?
Well, they released the five of the top. I mean, at least 5 in the top 10. They didn't release Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, but the top 10 Taliban, al-Qaeda. And by the way, everybody in Gitmo is affiliated with al-Qaeda. So what would bring that about? We've never in our history negotiated trades like that. And they said that there was no consideration made about the status of Bergdahl walking off of base, that it was about getting an American back, and we'll worry about that later.
All right, so wait, hold on. Let's unpack it.
A trade like that, it's a terrible trade.
Let's unpack it. The first thing is, I get that you're upset about who was doing it, but you can't say that you believe that our negotiators were working for al-Qaeda. I have to assume you don't believe that. So let's go to the next part.
But I could just say, I tried to say this. I said it looked.
I know,
when you
but
look
it's
at
just
the transaction. That's what it looks like.
Come on, Congressman. You know where that kind of talk gets us, and it's nowhere productive. That's why I'm just bringing it up so we can move past it. The second part, though, is what matters. Let's start looking at the analysis as you see it. Bo Bergdahl, we do not know, unless you learned something in one of these meetings or something classified that the rest of us don't know in the media, we do not know that he deserted at this point. Fair statement?
We know that he walked off base.
We know that it is likely that he walked off. Do you believe that's the same as desertion for sure?
I think that's something that should be brought to court, and I think that should be examined by a court with all the evidence that we have. But the evidence that we have, there's nothing to the contrary out there, Chris. And you listen to the people that served with him, those that were on the line, those that risked their lives, and those that lost their lives can't speak. They are almost of one person, one voice that he walked off.
Right.
And so that makes it. Didn't they cancel the homecoming ceremony for him in his hometown?
Well,
they must have had some evidence there.
Right. But hold on a second. They canceled it because they were so worried about protests and potential violence that they may not have been able to handle it in a relatively small municipality. It wasn't because they don't believe in Bergdahl. That would be misleading. You're not suggesting that, are you?
That's a new definition for me. Perhaps I should dig in a little deeper, but I think that there had to be a component of this that they didn't want to do a homecoming ceremony for someone who was such in question.
So do you think we shouldn't have done the deal?
I'm happy for his family. I'm happy his family's going to get him back, but I can't defend him.
Well, but hold on, but you can't say both either, right? Though, Congressman, you're happy for his family, but you're not really happy at all because you don't think they should have traded for him in the first place, right? If it were up to you, Bergdahl would still be with the Taliban. Is that true?
I would not have traded for him knowing what I know. And if there's more information about this, they should have told us in a classified briefing. They did not. We've been lied to in classified briefings in the past, however, so my level of confidence isn't very high. And it's a little bit tedious to listen to those same talking points stream out. And by the way, let's not forget, Susan Rice did lie to us. She said he was taken in battle. And it looks as though she is the person that the White House rolls out when someone has got to burnish their reputation, in her case, tarnish her reputation. So we should be concerned about that. The entire Congress should be angry about that. This has been misrepresented by this White House. It is a bad deal, and you don't trade terrorists of the highest level, brass terrorists, and trade them off in a situation like this. It encourages more. It's tactically a bad thing, even if Bergdahl were a hero. And I would say, interview some POWs, some Vietnam POWs. They said, return with honor or I will not return. I don't know that these soldiers would have accepted that trade if they had been of that caliber.
All right, so we are going to leave that part of the discussion there for now because we need more information on it. We have to know from Bergdahl and more information about how he came to be taken captive so we can assess that part. And the deal, obviously, will keep going forward. The timing is legitimate for criticism. That's why we're following that story as well. One quick take from you before we let you go, Congressman. Immigration. How do you balance humanity with rule of law in dealing with this influx of kids? We don't know where their families are in a lot of these cases. Sometimes they get together. Mostly they're not. The conditions they're being held in is not good. How do you balance humanity with shoring up the border and following the rule of law?
That is a really tough question under these circumstances that we have, Chris. First I have to back up and say the president has sent the message out. He's not going to enforce the law. That message has echoed out through Mexico and Central America. Now they're sending people and pouring them across the border. How are they getting into the United States is one question that's not resolved. But we have thousands of youth on our hands, and as young as 3 that are unaccompanied minors. And we have to take care of them, and we have to figure out how to repatriate them back to their home countries. This administration is trying to find a way to repatriate them into the United States of America. So I would be negotiating with the donor countries, the Central American countries, and Mexico. I'd be looking at the foreign aid that we send to them. I'd be slowing that down if we didn't get cooperation. But I believe that they can be repatriated in their home countries, and we should be taking them back for those countries to take care of their people. If we don't, we're going to see an endless flood from Central and America and Mexico. This is the tip of the iceberg. It will get a lot greater if we don't shut this down. But let's do it with a gentle hand, because these are kids, and some of these kids, it's not their fault. Some of these kids are absolutely old enough that it is their fault, however, Chris.
Well, but most of them are kids, and they got sent here by their family. And I understand everything you're saying there, but the last part deserves some reiteration here, because you have to make sure, Congressman, that you don't let the politics carry you away from the humanity you're dealing with these kids. You can't just let them sit in facilities like the one they're sitting in down there in the Southwest right now. That's got to be the priority.
What we need to have is the principle of the rule of law. If we had held that in place, if the president hadn't sent the wrong message and some previous presidents, we wouldn't have this happen. We've got to restore the rule of law with regard to immigration in this country. And if we do not do that, it's not going to be restored within the lifetime of this republic. That's the tragedy. A pillar of American exceptionalism is being chiseled away at because of the lackluster approach by our president, especially on immigration. Well, he wants this to happen because it's a political tool for him, and that's cruel.
Fair basis source of debate and criticism about how this happened in the first place, but don't let the kids pay the price, Congressman, because, you know, we all know that that's not deserved in this situation. We're going to follow that one very closely as well. Appreciate you. Appreciate you being here, as always. Thanks for joining us on New Day. Good luck down there.
Thanks, Chris.